Good afternoon, Professor and class. My name is Lisa Walton, and today I'll be reporting a correlational study conducted on social media use and self-esteem levels. More specifically, I'll be discussing how high uses of social media contributes to lower self-esteem levels in adolescent populations. This presentation serves to analyze, investigate, and report a quantitative study conducted on adolescent individuals who frequently use social media. The research focuses on identifying and reviewing the existing relationship, or lack thereof, between the prevalent use of social media and how it correlates to low rates of self-esteem in youth populations. All of the data is further supported by other empirical research studies conducted that further emphasize the detrimental effects on adolescent mental health, specifically self-esteem. Studies have suggested that an increase in adolescent social media usage has led to lower levels of self-esteem, and this is largely due to new findings that show excessive use of social media has negative impacts on body image for adolescents in both genders. In addition to low levels of self-esteem, mental health experts also reported other mental health conditions like anxiety and depression as a result of frequent use of social media. It is extremely important to understand and highlight the importance of appropriate limits of usage, and equally detrimental to educate the public, especially the adolescent population, about the effects frequent social media use has on their individual mental health. So we start off with a few research questions and our hypothesis. The first one being, is there an existing relationship between the frequency of using social media and self-esteem in adolescent populations? So we want to know if there exists any statistical relationship between adolescent populations that use a lot of social media and how their self-esteem levels report as being lower than average. And the second question is, do social comparisons from social media use have impacts on adolescent self-esteem levels? Our null hypothesis, or H0, would indicate that there was no statistical relationship found between the variables, and our variables in this case being high usage of social media use and low levels of self-esteem. The alternative hypothesis, H1, also known as HA, would indicate that adolescent children who do engage in frequent social media use, specifically the adolescents who spend significant amount of time on social media compared to others, are more likely to exhibit lower levels of self-esteem than adolescents who engage in minimal use. During the study, I conducted 2 literature reviews, the first one being from an article called The Relationships Between Social Media Use and Factors Relating to Depression. Now, these authors concluded that there is a negative correlation between social media use and low self-esteem, as the lower self-esteem scores were seen in the study to be associated with higher levels of social media usage. The authors also reported that adolescents received extreme satisfaction when receiving likes on social media, as well as the opposite reaction where low likes resulted in low levels of self-esteem and other negative feelings. The authors also found that adolescent social comparisons is a detrimental factor in declining levels of self-esteem. An additional literature review conducted showed that adolescents who reduced their social media use by half, or 50%, showed a significant improvement to their self-esteem levels. These findings, reported by medical Dr. Douglas Newton, were consistent in supporting the original research question that we had, which was, does frequent social media use contribute to lower levels of self-esteem, and does social comparison also cause negative feelings? There are multiple theories that can support the existing correlation between high social media usage and self-esteem levels, with one being the social comparison theory. The social comparison theory was used to analyze the extent to which social media use can influence or alter an adolescent's perception of themselves. By using this theory, we can suggest that people will usually value either their social or personal worth by comparing themselves to other people. This theory originally was introduced by psychologist Leon Festinger in 1954, and it did propose that people have a drive to evaluate and even change themselves based on what they observe other people doing. The themes and foundation of this theory contribute to the motivations behind social comparisons between adolescents on social media. As you can see in the table provided here from ResearchGate, it shows that an individual that compares themselves in a positive way on social media will ultimately have positive effects, whether that's feeling good about themselves or their lives in comparison to the other people. The opposite can also be true, as you can tell here from the individual who decides to compare themselves in a negative light to other people on social media, where ultimately they would have negative effects towards themselves or how they feel about their own lives compared to what they're seeing on social media with other people. So for the current research method study design, I chose to do a correlational analysis between the variables, and this would consist of absolutely no manipulation between the variables. In this case, variable A would represent the daily hours of social media usage, and variable B would represent the self-esteem levels that the adolescent participants would have reported. The testing method preferred would be the paired samples t-test, because we can use it to compare the means of both measurements in order to find an existing correlation. Because the variables, both A and B, were not manipulated during the correlational analysis, the reported scores from the questionnaire were inputted as is into the correlational analysis tool. We did not increase or decrease any of the data, we left it as is. In order to gather data for the study, I recruited 20 adolescents ages 10 to 14 years of age to become participants in the study. 50% consisted of female and 50% consisted of male participants, and they were all recruited from participating middle schools in the local area. So the first thing I had to do was collect all of their data via a questionnaire that was given to the consenting participants. The instruments used to collect the data was one, a social media usage questionnaire, which asked the adolescent youth population of participants how many hours of social media use they use per day. And another one was a self-esteem scale that would ask the participants to rate their self-esteem levels on a scale of 1 to 5. And because the participants were under 18 years of age, making them all minors, I was first required to obtain a parental permission form and also informed consent from the participants. So I was able to receive written permission from the parents stating they gave their adolescents permission to participate in the study, and then I got permission from the adolescents that they would participate in this unpaid study. Once all of the data collection was complete and I obtained all of the required permission and informed consent from the participants and the parents, I was able to input all of the data into a table. As you can see here, I separated them into two tables. On the left consists of 10 female participants ages 10 to 14 and their self-esteem scores, and on the right side we have the males with their social media use and their self-esteem score. The inputted data includes the number of hours of daily social media use and followed by a scale of 1 to 5 for the self-esteem score. 1 on the self-esteem score would indicate a very low rate of self-esteem, whereas 5 would be a high level of self-esteem. After all of the participant data was collected and recorded, we inputted the data into a correlation coefficient system. The data input showed a Pearson correlation coefficient, also known as R, of negative 0.958. Now, because this is significantly larger than the significance level of testing, it actually signifies that there is a strong negative correlation between the variables. Our findings showed that there is an existing strong negative correlation between frequent adolescent social media use and low levels of self-esteem. Because the p-value was calculated to be less than the significance level of testing, we reject the null hypothesis, or H0, which originally we discussed that the null hypothesis indicates that there is no statistic significant relationship between the variables. In this case, we reject the null hypothesis. We would approve the alternative hypothesis that says there is an existing strong correlation between the two variables. We can also see here in the scatter plot that shows a negative slope of the variables, also indicating that there is a negative correlation between them. Essentially, this would mean that as variable A, or the daily hours of social media usage, increases, variable B, or the self-esteem levels of an adolescent, would decrease. You can see here from left to right how the slope goes down in a negative direction. It's imperative that we focus on the future of social media and how it relates to self-esteem and other mental health issues. The continued findings of negative relationships between high social media use and low self-esteem in adolescents proves to be a continuing issue for mental health experts. There are some studies that should be a top priority in the future when it comes to studying social media impacts on mental health. The first one being continued correlational analysis like the one conducted and reported here, longitudinal studies, and experimental studies. This study also contained two limitations, one of them being a self-reporting bias and a participant/population size. There were only 20 participants in the study. In the future, there should be more to eliminate the possibility of error, as well as clear and concise words to eliminate further error on questionnaires and data collection. This critical study found a significant statistical relationship between high social media usage and low levels of self-esteem in adolescents. Instead of a causation, which this study did not find a causation, it found a correlation between the two variables, which would indicate that an increase in one variable would essentially decrease the other variable, and vice versa. The results of the findings support the hypothesis, fueling an imperative need for continued progress. We also should be aware and focus on increasing the education and awareness for adolescents, parents, school educators, and mental health professionals to ensure that we are educating everybody on the effects of high social media usage. Thank you.